This is not just the story of a pope, from a simple priest walking the streets of Buenos Aires to the most beloved and humble pope the world has ever seen. Pope Francis became a symbol of mercy, compassion, and humility. He embraced the broken, defended the poor, and reminded the world that faith must be lived, not just preached. He led not from a throne, but from among the people. This is the journey of a man who transformed the church by living its true message. This is the legacy of Pope Francis. Long before the world called him Pope Francis, he was simply Jorge Mario Bergoglio. He was born on December 17, 1936, in the bustling city of Buenos Aires, Argentina. The son of Italian immigrants, Jorge grew up in a modest home. His father worked as a railway accountant. His mother raised 5 children. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was rich in values: faith, family, and hard work. As a boy, he loved soccer and tango, but he also carried a seriousness beyond his years. Those who knew him remember a quiet, thoughtful child, deeply observant, compassionate, and drawn to prayer. But his path wasn't always straight. In his teenage years, Jorge studied chemistry and briefly considered a career in science. He even had a girlfriend once, and the idea of marriage seemed possible. But something deeper stirred inside him, a quiet call, pulling him toward a different kind of love, one that would demand everything. At the age of 21, a severe illness nearly took his life. He lost part of his lung and spent days in the hospital fighting to survive. In that solitude and suffering, he heard God's voice more clearly than ever before. It was a turning point, not just in health, but in purpose. Soon after, he entered the seminary and joined the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. The Jesuits were known for their intellect, their discipline, and their commitment to serving the poor and the marginalized. It was the perfect path for a man like Jorge. He took his vows not for status or position, but to be closer to the people and to God. As a priest, he didn't chase the spotlight. He stayed close to the streets, to the barrios, to those the world forgot. He became known not for sermons, but for listening, not for power, but for presence. By the early 2000s, Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio had become a quiet but respected leader in the Catholic Church. He was known for his simplicity, his discipline, and his deep compassion for the poor. In Argentina, he walked the streets instead of riding in limousines. He rejected fame and titles. He was never one to seek attention, which is why, when the papal conclave was called in March 2013 after the historic resignation of Pope Benedict XVI, Cardinal Bergoglio was not considered a frontrunner. Sometimes, the Holy Spirit moves in unexpected ways. Inside the Sistine Chapel, the cardinals prayed for guidance. The world outside waited, anxious, hopeful, and unsure. And then it happened. White smoke, bells ringing. The announcement, Habemus Papam. Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio had been chosen, the first pope from the Southern Hemisphere, the first from Latin America, the first Jesuit pope in history. But it wasn't just his background that caught the world by surprise. It was his name. When asked what name he would take as pope, he chose Francis, after St. Francis of Assisi, a man known for radical poverty, love for nature, and deep care for the poor. No pope in 2,000 years had ever chosen that name, and with it, he sent a message to the world before ever speaking a word. This would be a papacy of humility, of healing, of hope. When he finally appeared before the world on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, there was no wave of triumph, no grand speech, just a gentle smile and a simple request. Before the bishop blesses the people, I ask you to pray to the Lord that he blesses me. He bowed. The crowd fell silent. In that moment, history paused and something changed. He was now Pope Francis, but he had not left Jorge behind. From the very first hour of his papacy, it was clear. This pope would not reign like a king. He would serve like a shepherd. He chose not to live in the apostolic palace, but in a modest guest house. He refused the golden cross, keeping his simple silver one. He rode in a small car. He carried his own bag. He spoke plainly, honestly, and with deep conviction. In an age of spectacle, he gave the world sincerity. In a church bruised by scandal and doubt, he offered the healing power of humility. Pope Francis became the spiritual father not only of Catholics, but of anyone longing for mercy, for justice, and for truth. And with each step, each word, each gesture, he reminded the world that the church was not a museum of saints, but a sanctuary for sinners. 1. Washing the feet of prisoners and refugees. Rome, 2013. Just days after becoming Pope, Pope Francis broke tradition. Instead of washing the feet of priests inside a grand basilica, he went to a youth prison where he knelt before 12 young detainees, including Muslims and women, and washed their feet. This moment sent shockwaves around the world. It shattered expectations of papal distance and hierarchy. It showed in action that Christ-like leadership meant humility, service, and inclusion. It was a living message. No one is beneath love. 2. Publishing Laudato Si', a call to care for the earth. Vatican, 2015. Pope Francis released Laudato Si', a groundbreaking encyclical focused on climate change, environmental destruction, and the responsibility of humanity to care for creation and the poor who suffer the most from ecological abuse. This was the first time a pope had placed environmental justice at the heart of faith. It inspired world leaders, scientists, and religious groups to work together. Pope Francis connected spirituality to sustainability, teaching that the earth is sacred, and so are the people who depend on it. Third meeting with Grand Imam of Al-Azhar in Abu Dhabi, 2019. Pope Francis became the first pope in history to visit the Arabian Peninsula. He signed the document on human fraternity with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, calling for peace, dialogue, and mutual respect between Christians and Muslims. This was a milestone in Christian-Muslim relations. It set an example of reconciliation and mutual dignity across faiths. It wasn't about theology. It was about humanity. In a divided world, Pope Francis chose unity over fear. Fourth, embracing the disfigured man in St. Peter's Square, 2013. One of the most iconic moments of his papacy happened in St. Peter's Square. A man named Venuccio, disfigured by a rare disease, stood in the crowd. Most would look away. Many had. Pope Francis walked straight to him. He didn't hesitate. He embraced him. He kissed his face. He whispered in his ear. This powerful moment showed that dignity knows no condition. It reminded the world that the church is not just for the beautiful, the clean, or the strong, but for those scarred by life. It was mercy in its purest form. 5. His remark about LGBTQ+ individuals. 2013. Pope Francis knew the church had wounded many, especially the LGBTQ+ community, women, and divorced Catholics. When asked about gay Catholics early in his papacy, he responded, "If someone is gay and is seeking God, who am I to judge?" Though not a change in doctrine, this one sentence softened the church's tone and opened the door to compassion. It offered hope to countless LGBTQ+ Catholics who felt excluded. It didn't erase pain, but it offered a hand. Pope Francis will be remembered not just as the first pope from Latin America or the first Jesuit pope, but as the pope who made faith human again. He showed the world that holiness is not perfection. It is presence. His legacy is alive in every shelter that opens its doors, every voice that speaks for the voiceless, every church that welcomes instead of judges. He taught that the gospel is not a doctrine locked in books. It's a light meant to be carried into the streets. He lived the Beatitudes. He embodied grace, and he brought credibility back to love. His humbleness, his courage, his love, they will never be forgotten. He will always be remembered as the Pope who bent down instead of rising up, as the leader who chose the poor over power, as the man who reminded the world that God's mercy is wider than we ever imagined. Thank you, Pope Francis. Rest now in peace. Your legacy will forever shine in the heart of the Church and in the hearts of the people you served so well.